Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Alexis Badenmare. I'm the political director of the Organic Consumers Association, and this is the new MDs, mothers, doctors, and scientists. We have Mother Zen Honeycutt of Moms Across America. We have Dr. Pediatrician Michelle Perro, and we have Dr. Stephanie Seneff, our scientist. So if you have been watching our show, you know that our last episode was all about obesity. And if you missed that, please check it out. But at the end of the show, we started to talk about solutions, and we got into detoxification strategies. We talked a little bit about moving our lymph nodes. Zen talked about how walking for just an hour a day can be an amazing strategy for detoxification. We talked a little bit about gluten-free diets, dairy-free diets to address inflammation, and sometimes those diets have a wonderful side effect of also removing excess fat from the body. But that's all we got through in terms of detoxification. And detoxification is a really, really important topic when we're talking about obesity. But we're going to start with our favorite topic, or maybe our least favorite topic, glyphosate, Monsanto's Roundup. Dr. Michelle Perro wrote the book, What's Making Our Children Sick? Dr. Stephanie Seneff wrote the book Toxic Legacy, and Zen's book Unstoppable is also about her campaign against Roundup. So there's an incredible amount of expertise here on the topic of Roundup herbicide. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it might be the obesogen that we're exposed to most of, I mean, who knows, right? But glyphosate is the top used chemical in the history of humanity. It's an obesogen, as we learned in our last episode. And we're basically all exposed to it unless you have a 100% organic diet and live in a 100% pristine environment free of any pesticide drift. So, Zen, you have an amazing story to tell. I've done it before, but I recommend the movie Secret Ingredients, which really gets into this deep. But I'm going to have you tell your story about detoxing your own son from his exposure to pesticides. And then we're going to get into why, the whys and hows of how this is in the body with Dr. Seneff. She's going to take us through that. And then we're going to look more generally at the whole picture of obesity, all of the obesogens, and all the different ways to detox. But let's zoom in on one mother story, because this is the new MDs. And the idea is that really mothers and fathers, we're the first doctors in the family. We're the ones who have to notice the symptoms and start figuring out a strategy for what experts to call in to help our family. And Zen, I know your story. It's like you're just smarter than anybody I know. And
No.
no,
No,
really,
I'm like millions of mothers out there, and I would like to point out we're all mothers on this panel, so we're all coming from that perspective, and it's awesome. And even if you're not a mother, you are looking to take care of your body and your health. And so I think that everybody can kind of relate to my story in one way or another. And I kind of have two stories. One is about the exposure through food, and one is through environmental exposure regarding actually the same son. So my middle son, Bodhi, was about 8.5 years old, and he suddenly had an onset of autism symptoms. And we did not know why. He was, kicking and screaming and hitting, and I could tell in his eyes, even when his father said, "This is just a phase," I said, no. There's something else going on here, right? And because I could see the look in his eyes when he was trying to hit me, that he didn't like himself. He didn't want to be doing this, and he needed help. Yeah. So I took him to a doctor, and he tested him, and he said that he had very high levels of C. diff and Clostridia and all kinds of funky gut bacteria, right? He tested his urine. And I was like, why is this happening? And he said, well, the kids are exposed to toxins. He's like, your son has holes in his small intestines, like leaky gut. And basically every kid in America has this right now. Your kids are just lucky to have a mother who's taken him to a doctor who can figure this out. And this doctor happened to be an autism doctor. His son had autism.
wow.
And I was taking my kids to that doctor because he did a spaced out vaccine schedule. At the time, I was still doing that. And so I said, well, what's going on here? He said, well, the gut bacteria is causing inflammation in the brain and causing these autism symptoms. He doesn't have autism, he has autism symptoms. And I was like, wait a second, that's what glyphosate does, because I had already learned about glyphosate at that point. It destroys the beneficial gut bacteria and triggers the microglia, I'm sorry, triggers the lipopolysaccharides on the outer walls of these bad bacteria, trigger the vagus nerve to go up into the gut, to go up into the brain and tell the microglia cells to go and attack and to create inflammation, and it can cause autism symptoms. And he had no idea. I told him about this. He had no idea about glyphosate. And that's why I love this panel, because it's moms and scientists and doctors talking. And that's what I did in that doctor's office. We must have talked for 45 minutes. And he said I should be on talking maps, at these conferences with doctors. I'm like, well, I'm not a doctor, but you can do that. And so we decided to go 100% glyphosate free, which at the time I realized meant he had to take out gluten. My other two sons were gluten intolerant, so they weren't eating gluten. My middle son was eating gluten, and we know now that gluten is sprayed with glyphosate as a drying agent. And so I was like, well, that's the only difference my kids have in their diet. And so we tested him around the same time. We finally initiated the first glyphosate testing in America, and we found that son had glyphosate levels that of a farmer. And so that was 8.7 parts per billion. I was furious to see that amount of glyphosate in my son's urine. So we said, that's it, 100% organic, everything out of the pantry. And within 6 weeks of treating his gut, we did have to do some probiotics and antibiotics and stuff like that. But we also did colloidal silver and sauerkraut, 100% organic, and no sugar in between. I think it was Thanksgiving and New Year's, no sugar at all. Even Santa Claus brought no sugar candy, right? And so because sugar feeds the bad gut bacteria. So we did no sugar, and my son healed himself. He had no detectable levels of glyphosate within 6 weeks, and his autism symptoms were gone.
Amazing.
And he ended up, restoring his gut bacteria and being able to eat foods now and then that weren't organic, but later on, over about a year or so. And during that time, my other son, his allergies dropped from a 19 down to a 0.2. Those were life-threatening allergies. So my whole family benefited from that. I think my husband lost like 10 pounds, something like that too. So getting that glyphosate out of his gut, in our case, helped recover his autism symptoms. And I'm sure I have another story to tell, but Michelle, isn't this what you're seeing in your practices, that when children remove glyphosate from their diet, that they see improved behavior and autism symptoms?
Absolutely. And your story highlights the story and the journey of so many families so well. Number one, you need to have at least one parent on board and being very aggressive in making these changes, because it's not easy. You're going against pediatricians, you're going against the school, you're going against the soccer team, you're making changes, and you've become the helicopter parent, helicopter mom of the community. So you're doing that. You have to literally start fresh, throw out everything in the pantry and start over. It's a huge financial and learning curve. And then you got to get your kids and your spouse on board. So there's this thing that you have to do. Once you do that, indeed, you're correct, because as you make those dietary changes, not only you're switching to organic, removing all the pesticides, glyphosate-based herbicides and others, fungicides, insecticides, all the nasty stuff, but you start switching to a whole foods, higher phytonutrient, higher enzymes, higher quality food. So you're lowering the toxic load, you're increasing the nutrient density of the diet, more whole foods because you have to cook more, and you're removing the anti-inflammatory foods, mostly gluten and dairy, and there are others. So you're making all these switches, you're feeding your microbiome all those yummy fiber, which the microbes thrive on. Love your bugs. And then those healthy microbiomes, microbes make the switch, because those microbes produce both beneficial substances and toxic substances. Remember, toxins are organic, produced by microbes, for example. Toxicants are inorganic, like the metals, the pesticides, the plastics, and we have to alter both. So you decrease the toxicants, you improve the toxic exposure from your own internal milieu, and so you create a rebalanced, homeostatic gut that talks to brain, gut-brain axis, gut-brain microbiome axis.
And Stephanie, I learned that about the vagus nerve and the microglia cells and all of that from Dr.
That
Matt.
is beautiful. I was very
Did I
impressed
explain
to
that
see you
properly?
say that. It's perfect. Yes, and inflammation in the brain is what you see in autism. And it's due to this communication between the gut microbes and the brain, telling the brain, we're not happy, there's a problem here. And that sort of puts the brain on alert, and you get the inflammation in the brain. The immune cells, the microglia get activated. There's a lot of papers about microglial activation associated with autism.
Yeah, it creates an excitotoxin is what I learned, which just it vibrates the brain neurons and then they die. And so there's no connection happening. And that's why many children could have a loss of eye contact, or my son's, ability to control himself, things like that. And so, yeah, he went on, he did improve. He got much better. His grades went back up. Everything was really good for a while. And then we went cross country on our national toxin-free tour. And this is the environmental exposure that I think other people will relate to, not to this extreme level, but perhaps, your neighbor spraying Roundup or a farm nearby, right? So, but in my case, it was pretty extreme. We were traveling on the national toxin-free tour on our second day. We had a giant RV that said Moms Across America on the side. People could very clearly see us. And we were in Utah on an organic farm. And we woke up and went down to the greenhouse, which had like holes in the ceiling. The glass was not fully intact in all the places, but there was a greenhouse, and we were digging, and my kids were digging in there to start to plant things. And I looked out over this field, and I think we have a picture to show of a helicopter that was spraying pesticides. Yes, you can see the helicopter over the greenhouse. You can see how the greenhouse is kind of broken there. And there's a helicopter, a very small one, you can see right on the left lower corner. And that helicopter was spraying this giant field. The very green circles on the backside were, I thought, GMO soy or something like that. I thought it was spraying that field, but it wasn't. It was spraying the field in between the organic farm and the GMO farm. And I was, what is going on here? And the helicopter turned and came around and started to go straight towards our greenhouse, which was in the organic farm. And so I ran and grabbed my kids, but when we got in the greenhouse, the arm of the helicopter went over the greenhouse. It crossed over the border and doused my entire family with herbicide. And my son, Bodhi, the middle one that had the autism symptoms before, happened to be the only one not wearing a hat and underneath a glass pane that had been broken, an open pane. And there's another picture of within seconds, his nose was bleeding. You can see that within, about 30 seconds. And so he became very irritable and angry, and he developed a rash. I think we have a photo of that would pop up, over time. And he was, very unfortunate. He developed a lot of behavioral issues again. And so we had to go through a whole detox protocol with him. But before I get to that, I just want to say it's very suspicious that this happened because, the helicopter could obviously see my family. And I think it was connected to my activism work, but I can't say for sure. But what disturbs me about it is that I got urine samples from my family. We went to the hospital after this. And I got urine samples from my family because, I know people, I know labs who can test for, for instance, imazepyc, that was the name. It was called Plateau, was a very toxic weed killer that this man was spraying because we reported to police. The police came, the helicopter pilot was all cocky and he was probably high. And he was like, oh, go ahead and try to sue me. It's, you're not going to win. So we went to the hospital and they wouldn't do anything about it. So I got urine samples because, I know people. And Mike Adams' lab said that they would test for imazepyc in my children's urine. But then I got a call later saying, why did you send us urine samples? And I said, because you told me to. And the lab assistant asked me what email I used. And they said, no, that one's been compromised. And this entire bag of urine samples has been run over by a truck.
Wow.
Yeah. And they said like 3 or 4 times, there's no way we can test this. And so I was unable to prove that this imazepyc was in my family. And I was told by a lawyer that we can't sue because there's a constitutional law that makes the greater good is that, like the individual's rights don't prevail over the greater good, the state's rights. So there was no way that we could sue or anything. So that son, my same son, had behavioral issues and anger issues. And I am very clear that those toxins harmed his brain and his body. And he later on developed Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder, which can be triggered by toxins. and he now has electromagnetic sensitivity, and he can't go to school. He can't go to college. His body has been impacted by toxins. And if you could show the picture of what we used at the time for detoxing, I think we did a fairly good job. We have a picture of some bottles, primary detox. Yeah, there we go. Fulvic acid, charcoal, and I can't see what that other one is. I think it was a vitamin
it's
D.
vegan D3.
Vegan
My
D3.
Kind Organics. Yeah.
Yeah,
D3.
thank you so much. Yeah, so that's what I was told at the time by a doctor to use. And I'm very glad to be on this panel and have the show, because I want to talk more about what else can we do to detox. And I hope that this will benefit other mothers and people as well that are inundated by environmental toxins. They may not be being sprayed by a helicopter like my family was, but they may have a neighbor spraying Roundup, or they may live near a farm, or they may live near a highway with all kinds of petroleum pollutants, right? Or near an airport with all kinds of jet fuel coming out. I mean, we are being inundated. Or then there's, chemtrails and all kinds of, things that are being sprayed in. So let's get into it. And can we get into, Michelle, or I guess first, Stephanie, you're going to talk a little bit more about glyphosate, and then we're going to get to the solutions of how we can detox our bodies. I'm so excited.
Okay, I can do the glyphosate story because we have a brand new paper out, and I think he has a slide for that paper. That is Mills is an author, and it's a very exciting paper. Association of lifetime exposure to glyphosate and AMPA with liver inflammation and metabolic syndrome at young adulthood. Findings from the Chamaco study. This is a very thorough paper with very interesting design. Long term, these kids are 18 at the end, and it goes back to when the mother was pregnant with them. So it's a very long-term study. And they found, first of all, they had a subgroup of 60 kids that had high liver enzymes. That's a characteristic feature of liver disease, or fatty liver disease, which is an epidemic. We have an epidemic in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is caused by fructose. And really, it's not the fructose; it's the toxins that I think are causing the fructose to not be properly metabolized by the liver. And of course, glyphosate is one of those toxins. Also, there's mercury in the fructose, and glyphosate disrupts the body's ability to detox mercury. So you have this kind of combination of things that leads to this situation. But there are 85% of the kids who were the 60 that had this high level of these liver enzymes had obesity. 85% were obese. It's a very high number. And I think the obesity is directly connected to the glyphosate. I've looked all over the world. You can trace at the country level, countries that use a lot of glyphosate are obese, countries that don't are not. It's very striking in Africa, for example, South Africa and the Mediterranean coast. The Mediterranean coast gets a lot of processed food from the West, and South Africa is very heavily into GMOs. And those are the obese countries. There's a huge gap between them and the other countries in Africa. They have the small family farms. They don't have the obesity. Very, very striking. And every time a country starts adopting Western food, they start getting fat around the world. And I think glyphosate I believe it's the biggest factor in the obesity epidemic. Of course, America, we have some numbers in our data on obesity levels in America. And it's just shocking how much our obesity keeps going up. The number of people who are obese in this country just keeps going up. And more children are obese now. So this study looked at, they had a case control study with these 60 kids who had the high levels of the liver enzymes. And they showed very statistically strong evidence that these kids, first of all, they had glyphosate levels in their urine that were high. And they had them that were high when they were 5 years old. So they traced at 5, different ages. They tested them again. Consistently high levels of glyphosate led to this metabolic syndrome that these kids had with much higher. There were many more cases of metabolic syndrome among those kids who had the high liver enzymes than the ones who didn't. They had these comparison. And just very strong evidence from many different directions. If the mother was living near agricultural fields when she was pregnant with this child who's now 18 years old, the child has a higher risk of metabolic syndrome. And metabolic syndrome is this, complex syndrome they've defined as having high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, low HDL, and sort of a profile that's a risk factor for heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. So it's not good to have, and of course, obesity is also part of that syndrome, and the syndrome that these kids have.
And Stephanie, there's another study that shows that glyphosate increases, or at least Anthony Samsel says that glyphosate increases the environmental harm, the harm from other environmental toxins.
That's absolutely true. And mercury is one of them. And of course, aluminum as well. I think aluminum and mercury become much more toxic in the presence of glyphosate, because the enzymes in the liver that detoxify them are broken by glyphosate. And I've written a lot about the sulfur system in my book, and how glyphosate really disturbs the whole processing of sulfur. And part of what that is you can't sulfate mercury, and mercury sulfate is the way you can get rid of it. The body sulfates in order to get rid of it. And if it can't sulfate it, then it produces another form of mercury that's very toxic instead. And so
it impairs the body's ability to detox, basically.
That's right. And all the fat soluble, this is another reason why you get fat. I really think glyphosate working synergistically with other things, both the toxic metals, but also all these fat soluble toxic chemicals that are used in agriculture, and also other exposures that we get that are, and even the things that the bugs make, the microbes make these toxins that are fat soluble. And then the liver knows how to deal with them, to turn them into water soluble products through these cytochrome P450 enzymes, and then these enzymes that attach to sulfate. Both of those are broken by glyphosate. So all these other chemicals become toxic. And what happens is a lot of people, their body decides to put those toxins into fat cells and build them around the waist. So that's how you get, and this abdominal obesity is part of the characteristic of metabolic syndrome, specifically around the waist. You're piling the toxins into fat cells that you're accumulating around your stomach, because your body doesn't want to release them into circulation. It's trying to protect your body from the exposure by making you get fat. In fact, I think when people go on a really strong diet and lose a lot of weight in a hurry, they can get sick from that, because they're releasing those toxins from those fat cells.
Stephanie,
what makes me really mad about that is that there's so many people, young women, that have a terrible self-esteem issue because they're overweight, and they have no idea that the glyphosate exposure that they're eating in their food could be contributing to this excess weight that they have trouble losing. And then they get depressed. I mean, suicide rates are up. It really makes me mad that this corporation is corrupting, and our government is allowing this basically government sanctioned poisoning of our food supply that's contributing to so many issues. And people say to me, Zen, not everything's connected to glyphosate.
I know. Of course, I get that too. I have a hammer and everything's a nail.
Really, it's so impactful. Anyway, I'm sure, Michelle, you have plenty.
And I want to say too, and anorexia is another thing, right? Because I think a lot of young women teenagers become obsessed with staying thin to the point where they starve themselves, and then they actually get to the point where they can't eat anymore, and they can die of just their whole digestive system is so wrecked that they can't eat, and then they can really get in trouble with actually dying from the anorexia.
Well, we've chronically poisoned our families. So what we're trying to focus on why we call this obesity too, is that the obesity is a complex metabolic, immunological, neuro issue, and every system is involved. And that what's driving obesity is not just people laying on the couch eating chips. Let's move past that. But these chemicals, they're called endocrine disrupting chemicals, obesogens, which glyphosate is one of them, and there are so many more, disrupt so many pathways in our body, including thyroid for energy production, mitochondria, your little energy powerhouses, your liver detoxification. All your hormonal systems get disrupted by these chemicals. And your fat metabolism pathway is tightly hormonally regulated by substances like leptin, adiponectin. There are many, and affects insulin production as well. So this is a very tightly orchestrated system, and chemicals, everything from glyphosate to organochlorines to others, PBDEs, DT, I think we all are DTT positive, affect our biologic systems. Your body will do everything to move these chemical toxicants out of your bloodstream into storage. And where do you have fat storage? Well, as Stephanie said, in your middle, your brain. Fat is in your ovary, folks. It's in your testy. But you tend to move into fat storage. It's even in your bone marrow. So your body that's why if you check chemicals in your blood, you may not see any. In your urine, you may see some if you've been recently exposed. But if you do a fat biopsy, you'll see tons of chemicals where they're stored. As a matter of fact, the EPA in 1972 set up an adipose monitoring system, looking at people's adipose that, of course, nobody's ever heard of, looking at chemical toxicity. So they, in the EPA, since 72, has known about this. We're not sharing like, oh gosh, aren't we brilliant? Found something new. The US government's known this and have been monitoring it. And you can even find it on the EPA and CDC websites, which I find very interesting, these monitoring systems. So Stephanie's spot on. As we try to lose weight, you release chemicals. Certain chemicals, when they're released, like organochlorines and other toxic stuff, that family of compounds, really nasty, slows down your metabolism. So as some people lose weight, they say, what's wrong? I can't lose more weight. I'm not eating anything. Well, it's true. Those chemicals have been released, have slowed down their metabolism. So we have to open up detoxification pathways, and we can delve into that strategy, how we do it. You can do this. It's not like, oh my God, this is doable. Oh, yeah. So we can talk about that, or
yeah, take it away, Dr. Pero. You're up.
So, I think we can show you one slide of just kind of the overview of both the toxicants and how we do this. We've made a couple slides for all the visual listeners and learners out there. I know we have a lot of visual people. We can show you some slides that we make, and that we're also going to put these slides on our various sites for all of you. But in the meantime, I can talk. So the main toxic exposures do come from pesticides, heavy metals, the plastics group, solvents, and air pollution. Just in general. And as we all know, there's more than 80,000 chemicals now. But so what you want to do is you must switch to organic diet. You must have at least a simple carbon-based water filter. Tap water most areas is pretty contaminated. For those of you who can, an air filter, which a HEPA filter they're called, especially for those of us who live near cities or busy streets, you need to get a filter. You have to reduce not just the internal toxic milieu, but the external by your personal care products, your household cleaning products, and what you're spraying in your yard. For Pete's sake, please don't spray, and tell your neighbors not to spray. I told mine not to spray, and they eventually moved. I know, maybe it was me, maybe it was something else, but tell your neighbors not to spray. So we have to reduce the toxic load. If you don't reduce the toxic load, there's no herb, no supplement, no charcoal that's going to save you, right? Because that is the key factor in detoxifying, is you must reduce the toxic load. And most of it's coming from your food and water. Remember, children may eat 6 or 8 times a day, especially a baby. And this is key. So we reduce toxic load. And then I can share with you some ideas if you want to go into it or discuss that a little bit, or I can give you some strategies. We can see where you want to go with this team. I'm open.
Well, let's get your slides up. You put together a fantastic slideshow for us that describes the whole detox process as you would take someone through it as a patient. So let's get the slideshow up, and yeah, all right.
Well, we can just go through these quickly. Let's just move some of these. You've heard about, there's lots of stuff, and the problem is moving along on this. Corey is our backstage wizard. Even our babies are born pre-polluted. We all keep quoting that EWG study from years ago, which showed babies had 286 chemicals. But what people don't realize is that we're all pretty chronically toxic. And you say, hey, I feel fine, until you get the straw that broke the camel's back, and then all of a sudden you topple. But you were toxic before, but you may not have known it. Moving along, Corey, thank you. So here, there are so many categories, but these are the main ones that we must avoid. And we defined that in episode 1 about the obesogens and the endocrine disruptors. And that name was from 2 research guys, I think, where they were from UC Davis. We can move on. Corey will go through this quickly. And so there's so many influences on toxicants and metabolism. And that's what I was referred to before. It's a multi-system thing, and it involves our entire body. It's not just what we put in our mouth that comes out. It's an entire complex system. And these are the effects from environmental toxicants. Whoa, it can just overload all of our systems. Moving along, it's never too late to make a change. The body is forgiving. So what do? This is the stuff I was just talking about. And we can get into, as Zen was alluding to, don't forget the emotional toxins. Clean up our relationships. And what we've done to our children the past few years is unacceptable. Moving along, that's what I'll say about that. And so solutions, I started going through this, and pre-pregnancy detox, team, we'll do a show just on that. The pre-pregnancy detox is a big subject, but I think it's a requirement now for any couple thinking about pregnancy. Please don't forget your friends, the house plants. This is my favorite, easy to grow. It sprouts those little carriers, and you can cut them and put them in water, and they grow new roots. And I always giving those as presents. They clean up air pollution. I've got one right behind me to clean up my own emotional toxins. Thank you very much. Moving along. Okay. So these accumulated toxins and toxicants, okay, they cause all kinds of not feeling good, brain fog, hair loss, fatigue, bad breath. Yeah. And folks say, I don't know what's wrong with me. Gave you a couple of links there for you to take a look. Moving along. So let's get into how you get rid of these toxicants. Fasting. Intermittent fasting can work. Fasting helps. You got to drink plenty of clean water. I like with lemon juice, which is an acid, but alkalinizing inside. Fresh fruit and veggie juices. We get rid of highly inflammatory foods like gluten and dairy, all organic. For kids who are toxic, I eliminate fish. Fish is high in heavy metals. And thanks to Zen and Moms Across America, avoid school lunches and, unfortunately, baby food. That's another topic. Whole foods diet, plant forward. Think of all those phytonutrients and enzymes in plants. Moving along. So here are just examples. You could take a picture, folks, if you're listening. The kinds of fruits and veggies, these are key. And those brassica family, like broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, watercress, they support phase 1, phase 2 detoxification in your liver. And you need those detoxification systems to move these things through. Teas, herbal teas, awesome. Even you can give herbal teas to kids, super good. And here I just took some examples. There are many, and those are all organic. And don't forget your herbs and spices. And I try to eat personally a little bit of cilantro every single day. Dandelion, I said, eat it, don't spray it. And milk thistle, silymarin, it's also known as, and this just give you an idea the kind of foods that we need to be eating in our diets. And there's a lot more information about this. This is an overview. And if you need some assistance, working with a holistic nutritionist is key. Moving along, Corey, thank you. And here we are, connect with us. And we will keep bringing you this information every month and the new MDs. And we can open this up to conversation.
Well, that's great. I have a question about, I think Stephanie wanted to talk about reducing plastics in the home as well, because, there's so many environmental exposures, but then we often don't think about what we're exposing our kids right in our kitchen and right in our house. And that can really add up over time, right? I mean, these plastics can shed these chemicals that bath toys and things in the kitchen and things we put our food in. And I know, Stephanie, you're pretty passionate about plastic. You live in Hawaii, and there's, I'm sure, all kinds of environmental plastics and stuff like that you're concerned about. Can you talk about that?
Definitely. In fact, I have a few props here because my husband, Victor Zhu, is actually very passionate about plastics. And he's been systematically getting rid of all the plastic in our house. And we've discovered some delightful things in the process. And one of the things, of course, is containers. People put their food, their leftovers, in plastic containers, right? Plastic container, plastic lid. And some people even don't know better, and they zap them in the microwave in the plastic, which is a really big no-no, because those microplastics can really get into the food when you microwave the plastic. So what we've come up with, for example, when you have leftovers, I have an example here. Let's see if you can see these. That's going to be a little mustard greens, which is one of my favorite vegetables. It's really, really healthy. In a bowl, so we've got some leftovers from last night. So you put this lid on it. You can hold it up. It's like this thing is a silicone cover, and there's lots of different options for these on the web. I just looked, lots of different products that are sold now. They're really fun. You just slip it over there. You don't have to use plastic wrap to cover it up, and certainly don't put it in a plastic container. So that's a very simple solution. Mm-hmm. The other thing was soaps. We actually don't use the dishwasher routinely, only when we have a lot of company, because there's only 2 of us, and I don't really like the dishwasher, the harsh soaps that are used in the dishwasher. So we wash the dishes by hand. And I was using a plastic, it's a liquid soap, like Joy, for example, but you have these eco-friendly ones, and they're terrible soaps. They don't really work. They're like really disgusting. And I was just totally frustrated. And Victor hated the fact that I had that plastic bottle. So he figured out, and I love it, how to do the dishwashing. Here's a bag, paper bag, powder, right? And they sell the powder and they sell the container. And this is silicone right here. And you just, dump in a little bit of the powder. It's extremely good. Just a tiny bit of the powder makes a great soap. The dishes come out great, and you don't use any plastic. And so,
and what kind of powder is that? What kind of detergent?
It's actually an eco-friendly Blue Land dish soap. It's called. And actually, Victor's gotten some soap for the dry powder for the washing machine as well. I used to always use Tide way back when, powdered Tide for washing the clothes. And then of course they had started having all these plastic bottles of liquid, which I hated actually. But eventually the Tide disappeared, and I started using plastic bottles. And then of course more recently we got hung up on, the soap is toxic. You have to have eco-friendly soap. And then he discovered powdered soap that you can use to wash the clothes.
Well,
So
I love that we just learned the dish detergent that Stephanie Seneff uses, and I just wanted to. We are going to, that's valuable information.
You should put that on your
mentioning, we're going to be mentioning a lot of products probably on the show. And I just want to say that we are not being paid to endorse any products at all. And everybody do your own research, right? This is not, of course, medical advice or any other kind of it's just what we're sharing. But I just think that's wonderful. Like, for instance, I use a water filter called AquaTrue that Erin Brockovich is the only filter that Erin Brockovich recommends. And I didn't know that until before Moms Across America decided to, offer that. But we have the AquaTrue filter, and there's also a zero waste filter that Mike Adams recommends, right? So we're gonna be talking, right? This is the part of the show, right, where we're gonna be talking about all the different solutions that we use. Yes. So yeah, so I love that. As far as plastic goes, I use the glass Tupperware always. I use the glass Tupperware for my children's. I'm sorry, I don't have a sample right now. And I use either glass or stainless steel water bottles. We don't use the plastic water bottles, of course. And I still have not gotten away from the plastic wrap yet, though. So thank you, Stephanie.
We've thrown it away. We don't use it at all, which is really great. It took some time to get to that point. And the other one, of course, is the little plastic zip bags, which sometimes we have a situation where we feel like it's really the only thing that's going to work. And then Victor actually washes them out and uses them again. So, I mean, that's a way to reduce too by reuse. I mean, you don't have to throw it away just because it's been used, but it takes effort and everything.
We use some of the paper bags. There's paper bags that you can just fold and kind of waxed. And so we use those for sandwiches or snacks or whatever. But
and of course, also just carrying a bag to the grocery store when you buy groceries, so you don't have to use either paper or plastic to, use your cloth bag that you bring with you to the grocery store. And people should all be doing that.
What happens in schools, but the schools get crazy when kids bring glass to school. And in, certain schools, the kids don't break the glass. So then you have to use stainless steel, some non-reactive stainless steel to send the kids to school. And they say, well, they're heavy. It's like,
I know. There are reasons why plastics just seem so perfect, and that's really a problem. I think
they are, and they're addictive to use because they're convenient, they're affordable. I have used some Ziplocs and rinse them out in certain occasions and try to switch to all glass and do those things. And this is not a plug for any company, but I've even switched my cookware lately to a non-toxic heavy metal free cookware, and I've used the Salad Masters, and I'm not, promoting anything here. It's titanium based and doesn't leach chemicals, but this is the level of knowledge you need, like a PhD in your home cookware stuff now. So before you start, supplementing your kitchen, buy less and buy quality, and tend to focus on glass and the best stuff that you can afford. And especially we want to avoid things like Teflon, no Teflon, and aluminum-based products, as well as the plastic. So we eliminate the plastics, eliminate the aluminum, and even in your aluminum foil for cooking and baking.
Never use that.
And try, that's some of the best things we can do. And this is what we have to do in our homes, and we have to re-educate ourselves. Our parents didn't have all these plastics. I know we didn't grow up with all these plastics.
I remember the wooden toys when I was a child, and then they all became plastic over time. Once plastic took over, the wooden toys disappeared because the plastic was so much cheaper.
And so, of course, and they're also in the toys. Those plastic toys it's not just the plastic phthalates in them, but they have paints in them that are
obesogens.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Clean Air was saying that There are silicone bags that you can use instead of sandwich bags.
Yes,
So that's
actually, I saw
really,
that note, and that's
really
right.
good
And I
point.
actually have
Yeah.
some of those. Yeah, those
Yeah,
silicone bags are
it's-
nice. The silicone really works out nicely, both for the lids. Actually, these lids are silicone. Also, the container that I use for my soap.
Yeah.
That's a nice alternative to plastic because it also doesn't break. You know, it works well.
So we're getting the plastics out of our house. Everybody, we're really encouraging people to just with it like an eagle eye walk around your house and just scan it and just start getting the plastics out of your
Even
house.
replace your toothbrush, you know, because the plastic in your mouth. Wooden toothbrush is something you can buy also.
Your toothbrush, yes, I have a bambu toothbrush with, I forgot what kind of bristles, but they're not plastic. And because they off gas, they shed whatever, phthalates. And the phthalates have been found in, especially in boys' bodies, they can contribute to breasts and endocrine disruption, to belly fat, right, to hormonal changes that are disruptive to their normal reproductive cycle and hormonal cycle. So it's really important to get rid of these plastics. So we're walking around the houses and we're doing that. But what about our bodies? What about, Michelle, can we talk more about the detox products that we use to get out of our bodies?
Certainly. So once we've done all that cleanup, you say, well, let's say you need a little more assistance, right? You've done all the stuff we recommend. You've gone organic, you've got your water filter, you're doing good. And it's like, but you're still having some issues. Then, well, we have to take it up a step. And so there are sometimes you have to use binders. They're toxicant binders. And what does that mean? That these substances, you have to take them and you have to take them away from other things because they bind everything, can bind up some of the nasty stuff. Like, what am I talking about? You have things like charcoal. You have things like bentonite clay. You have things like pectin fibers that you find them like in fruits, like in apples. And there's pectin that can bind. You have things like zeolite.
Apples, hang on a second. So apples are detoxing?
They have some pectin fiber.
Really?
So you would have to eat a lot of apples. The problem is an apple a day will keep me awake for sure. But a lot. Because that's why you have to get the product sometimes because you need more than what's in a food. And especially now that content of food has changed so much, you need more of it. And so sometimes, although I always prefer the food over the supplement. Did people hear that right? So
Yes.
No, you don't eat like drive-through burgers and then take a multivitamin. No, folks, that's not how it's worked. I remember that Alka-Seltzer commercial. Eat what you want and then take an Alka-Seltzer.
Right.
About that. Remember that old pop, fizz from the 70s?
Yeah.
And I think you're too young. Alexa's clearly too young. But what those were alkalinizers. So you want to keep your internal terrain alkalinized. You want to keep your pH higher. And what's alkalinizing are vegetables and some fruits, but mostly plant-based diets are alkalinizing. Lemons are acidic in your body. We were talking about this, but they're alkalinizing when you eat them internally. So that alkalinized environment, well, why? It keeps certain pathogens like fungi and mold not growing. They like a more acidic environment. So you can even check your own urine pH to see if you're alkalinized. On Amazon, you can buy these little pH strips and you check your morning urine and you want to be around 7 on your pH. And you just dip a little urine stick. If you're too acidic, you might want to consider eating more plants. Meat makes you more acidic. So for those of us who are eating meat and potato diet, you will be more acidic. You can actually, some people's noses are so good, they can actually even smell this. So alkalinizing, and especially for those folks who have problems with mold, it seems like that is a major issue now. You want to focus on alkalinizing. So that's pH. Some people take baking soda. Baking soda has a lot of sodium in it that could really up your sodium. So there's something called basic tabs that people can take if they want. So this is idea of how we do some binding. Don't forget, there are foods and herbs and supplements that you can take that are binding, like chlorella, but you want to make sure it's clean because a lot of these products are contaminated with heavy metals. Cilantro is that herb we can talk about, is a mild metal binder. It's not super strong, but it does clean up a lot of stuff. So that's another one you can take. And I can mention.
Can I ask if you're doing something like this? So let's just say you're adding chlorella to your smoothie or you're adding cilantro to your smoothie. Would you suggest that we do this every day? How much would you suggest, is used? Can you just get a little bit more into the details there?
Yeah, certainly. So it depends what you're trying to do. If you're really toxic and you have, let's say you work as a dental hygienist and you have a heavy exposure to heavy metals, you're going to need some assistance in helping you. But a garden variety, folks, moms and kids, you can probably start. I would probably just do a handful of cilantro in the smoothie along with your greens. You can put in some fruits. The fruit I like to put in there is pineapple. Why pineapple? Because pineapple has bromelain. Bromelain is an excellent enzyme that helps break down digestion, as well as things that inflammation, like fibrin. So bromelain is a really good thing. So I put that in there. I like coconut milk for kids in particular, but everybody, because it has a kind of fat that's easily digestible and good for the brain, something called medium chain triglycerides. So you make a really nice smoothie. You could throw some cilantro in there. Cilantro is great in salsas. You can put it in soup. If you're making soups, just add it after your soup is cooked. If you put your herbs in too soon, it will take all the nutrients out of it. So you add them in after the food is cooked. If you cook it up really fine, like the cilantro, use the stems also, because the stems have a lot of the plant phytonutrients in there. And don't forget that in addition to phytonutrients, plants also have enzymes, and enzymes aid your digestion. So people who eat a lot of processed foods, what I'm finding when I even look at their poop is their digestive enzymes are really low. So I used to think, why are their digestive enzymes so low? What's wrong? And they're not breaking down their nutrients, their macronutrients, proteins, fats, carbohydrates. It's because their enzymes are low. So let's get back to how much. So those plants, that plant forward stuff, you put a handful of cilantro in there. You put in some chlorella, clean chlorella. I recommend a company called BioPure. Again, we have no stock in any of these companies. They make a clean chlorella, and you can put some of the chlorella powder in there. If you're on a detox program with chlorella, there's a method on how you do it. And you need to take a lot of it over like a few months. So that's specific. Yeah. So if you're doing like a heavy metal detox or something like that, you need to, before you just launch in, you want to get these other pathways open before you just launch into a detox, because your body might be so toxic it's not ready. So first thing to do is shift your diet. You must shift your diet, and you have to get away off of processed foods. Those processed foods have no nutrient quality except what they add in. And also the stuff they put in processed foods, those emulsifiers and other things, are kill off your microbiome. Our microbiome is dying. And we cannot live without a robust microbiome, that collection of organisms that live in our gut. The numbers are dying, the quality is dying, the heterogeneity of our microbiome, the different types are dying. And those bugs, that collection of bugs, bacteria, viruses, archaea, protozoa, all kinds of stuff in there, are the first line of detoxification before your liver. So
yeah, I've heard that we're supposed to have 30,000 different types of bacteria in our guts. And there's a gut specialist that said on average, we have about 10,000 now. So we're at about 1/3 of the capacity. And that's the stronghold of our immune system too. So we're really at like 1/3 the capacity of our immune system. And in addition, that's where a lot of our important hormones are. So all these people with depression and, mental illness and all that out of whack, a lot of that has to do with the lack of good gut bacteria because of the toxins that are in our environment and in our food. And what I'm most worried about too is that, I have people say, oh, it's just a little bit of plastic or it's just a little bit of non-organic food, but we don't know when that cup runneth over. It could be one more drop, right? Because we have like a cup, we have like a capacity of what our bodies, especially our children, can handle as far as toxins go. And just that one more spoonful or one more, I hate to put like fear in people, but we can't tell, right? Dr. Perro, we can't tell when our body has added to capacity. And when the cup floweth over of these chemicals, we start seeing things like the behavioral issues or the liver toxicity or the, incapacity to start to remember things. We get brain fog and all kinds of things that can affect our daily lives and our relationships.
People can look at their own bodies to see if they're in a toxic overload, even if you don't feel any symptoms. Symptoms can come kind of late for some of us. And then one of the key things that people should look at is their tongue. It's the only muscle in your body that you can see. And if it looks kind of flabby and coated, and has little ridges on the side, that's not a healthy tongue, and you might need to take action. Another place are your nails. You can see some of these white spots, could be deposition of heavy metals in your nails. You could also see ridges, which could be signs of mineral deficiencies. The other place to look is your hair. Sometimes coarse hair, very coarse hair, and if your hair is changed or you're losing hair, those are all could be signs of environmental toxins and various toxicants. Dark circles under the eyes, and it's not because of sleep deprivation or you're a tired mom. It's because you might have food sensitivities, and those could appear as dark circles. And kids make all kinds of rashes. Rashes is not just something on the skin, it could represent something going on the gut. So eczema, which is a common inflammatory disease related to allergy in kids, it's called atopic disease. 60% of babies have some type of eczema. It's often a gut issue manifesting in the skin. And look for dairy sensitivity. I could tell you they're going to have a gut issue. So we can, and you can start looking at your own self. If you're like, gee, gosh, I feel great, I don't have any symptoms, but gee, my nails are funky, my tongue is coated, my hair is weird, I'm losing hair. Folks, those are like little mini alarms going off, that you got to take a better look at what's going on with your health. So
rashes are not a bad thing. They're actually your body's way of communicating with you that there's something going on, inflammation going on. But it's like a warning signal. It is a good thing that your body is telling you have a rash. You should not just slap a cream on it and hope it goes away. You should find out the source of that toxicity, because that is toxicity right there.
Root cause analysis. We want to go to the root cause and figure out what's going on. So to tell somebody who has some weight issues, oh yeah, exercise and go on a diet, wrong.
Yeah.
To the root cause of their obesity. Look at their hormones, look at their environment toxicant panels, and now people can order their own. Look at their exposures. These are things that we're asking people to, we're kind of shifting the paradigm on how we look at health. Obesity is just one issue, but it's all health challenges. And we're looking for root cause medicine. Get to why. And the whys, and one of the leading causes of why people are sick are environmental toxicity. And so this is what we're honing in on today. Maybe we have some of our attendees and listeners who have questions, Alexis. Do we have anybody in the chats with burning questions?
I'm looking at the Facebook chat, and Ann Temple is doing a great job of putting links in whenever you guys mention. So we've got a link in here to BioPure for the clean chlorella, links for how to test your urine or saliva for your pH. So thank you so much, Ann, for keeping up with us here in the chat to provide all those links.
I have a topic I'd like to bring up, which is tryptophan. Because I've really become aware. Well, I learned early on that tryptophan is, of course, a precursor to serotonin and to melatonin. So a lot of people are taking melatonin in order to sleep on a routine basis. Yep. And serotonin is the feel-good hormone. It's low serotonin is linked to depression and also to obesity. Serotonin is actually suppresses appetite. And tryptophan is an amino acid that comes out of the shikimate pathway, which glyphosate disrupts in the gut microbes. So you've got a problem. Many people, I think, have a problem with tryptophan deficiency. And I actually think it's, when you think about, I need melatonin at night in order to sleep, they say, well, my body should be able to make it. Well, it can't because there's not enough tryptophan. Why don't I supplement with tryptophan? And then you say, well, why supplement? Why don't I find out foods that are rich in tryptophan and make sure I'm eating those? And so we kind of went through that process. My husband was having a little trouble with sleep, and we decided, well, we're going to just increase our tryptophan containing foods. And it actually turns out some great solutions here and for good snacks. And I just have this organic cashew nuts, a big jug here from Costco. And the cashews are great because they're a good source of tryptophan, and they're also a good source of some important minerals.
That is so funny. I crave cashews before bed. I have a bag of them. That is the weirdest thing. That's so great to find that out. But I want to point out too that I tried to buy melatonin for my mom. She asked me to get some for her when she was visiting me, and I picked up one of the bottles. I think it was Nature Made. It had polyethylene glycol in it. There's so many, or was it polysorbate 80? I don't know. I get the two of those mixed up sometimes. But you got to really read your supplement labels.
Yes, I really worry about supplements. A lot of people think I'll just pop a supplement, solve the problem. And I always try to find a food solution. Whenever someone says you need to take iron, don't take iron. Eat foods that contain iron. In fact, I have a fun story about the mustard greens, because when I was much younger, my third son I was pregnant with my third son. My doctor tested my blood and found out I was anemic because of deficiency in iron when I was like 3 months pregnant. And he put me immediately on an iron pill. And I had a midwife who was going to get, my doctor was just there as background, and my midwife was going to deliver the baby at home. And she said, throw these away. They're no good. Don't take these iron pills. And instead, she sent me to a naturopath store and got a natural B vitamin complex that I started taking. But also the iron, what I started doing was eating lots and lots of mustard greens. So we were having stirred mustard greens for dinner, on a routine basis. And I did this for that whole month. Went back to the doctor a month later, hadn't taken any of the iron pills. And the doctor tested my iron, it was fine. He said, well, the pills worked great. And I didn't even tell him that I didn't take the pills because I didn't want to antagonize him.
And right now, I have to say in North Carolina, there's purple dead nettle, very high in iron. There are plants that you can forage that are just in your yard that you can add to your salad. You can add the leaves. So people are asking what foods are high in tryptophan and iron. Can you mention a few more of those?
Yeah, so the cashews, and also we have these pumpkin seeds, which we throw onto our salad. So we make a great salad every night, and we throw all kinds of things in there. And these pumpkin seeds are one of them. I don't know if you can see those.
And
they're very good.
And
they're delicious.
Interrupts those microbes and it interferes with microbes that make tryptophan, glyphosate. So you have to go organic. And Stephanie, I have to just bring this up, Zen. Pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals are also obesogens. So we want from farmer to farm, as we talk about all the time, is because so many kids now are on antidepressant drugs like the SSRIs, and those can promote weight gain. And
absolutely.
So they are also obesogens in a sense. So pharmaceuticals, remember, so many pharmaceuticals deplete glutathione, that master antioxidant in our body. And so you want to avoid pharmaceuticals. We did that great show where we talked about this when we talked about pharma. I think that was episode 4, like acetaminophen, Tylenol, all those drugs that reduce glutathione. You need high antioxidants.
Yeah, and if you do want to take a detox product, and Moms Across America recommends Primary Detox. It's Chinese herbs and roots, and the mother is a mother that made it, and she tests everything for heavy metals. And Michelle recommends Zoe Global Clear Drops. I think we have an image of that, right, Dr. Pero?
I do. This is my newest thing that I've gone into is using a zeolite binder that is water soluble. Most zeolites are not water soluble. This product is water soluble, and it's this patented formula where they use vitamin C to make it water soluble, because the zeolite, if you took the product by itself, doesn't leave the gut. A lot of zeolites are contaminated with heavy metals. And so, but this one is not. It's tested for 69 metals. And then most companies only test for 4 heavy metals. They're way more than 4. So you can do these binders and to kind of help your body clear things up, because we live in the world. And so we just sort of have to assist our bodies to help on a regular basis. I love what you guys are sharing about the foods, and vegans do a really good job because they use a lot of cashews. I'm not recommending that anyone do any specific diet, but in vegetarian and vegan diet, they do use a lot of cashews. I'm making cashew dressings. I've gotten into this lately. So cashews make a great salad dressing.
And I want to make sure that we touch on the testing. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in here, Alexis, because there's a link to a lab that Stephanie, you recommended a certain lab. What was it called?
My Labs for Life. My Labs for Life.
My Labs for Life. If we can show that the basis for being able to get your body detoxed is to first find out what kind of toxins you have in your body, wouldn't you say? And you can get a toxin test from My Med Labs for Life. If we can show that.
My Labs for Life.
What is it?
My Labs for Life.
My Labs for Life. Yeah, so you don't have to go to a doctor in order to get these tests, but there are Great Plains Labs has a GPL tox test, which you could get through your doctor.
And My Labs for Life goes to Great Plains to do the testing, but there's
they do.
A bridge.
And they have like a $99 hair test, and hair to look for example heavy metals, and hair reflects what you've been exposed to over 3 months. If you just do a blood test, it only looks at what you've been acutely exposed to over maybe 2 to 3 days. So using hair analysis is a great way to get a sense. These are adjuncts. Remember, testing is an adjunct, to how into your care team, but it can give you an idea what you're exposed to. They're pretty accurate. And a lot of people, it's not mainstream medicine using hair testing. Not sure why. Well, actually, we are sure why, aren't we? That's a different show. But yeah, you can use hair testing.
Great.
There were questions in the chat about natural sources of iodine.
Oh, I've got an example here. Can you see that?
Yes, seaweed.
Organic seaweed. This is a great source of iodine, and it's a tasty snack. So I like to find things that if you're hungry in the middle of the day, between meals, just take a few cashews or have some seaweed. So instead of going for cookies and candies, it's much, much healthier.
And another question in the chat, what about silver and copper? Are they useful for detoxification, or do we sometimes need to detox from having too much copper in our diet? What are your, it's kind of an open-ended question. So
yeah, you need a balance among the minerals, and it can get tricky if you start taking one supplement. In fact, there's some concern that people are taking too much zinc. Lately, people are talking about zinc to protect from COVID, and so a lot of people are taking zinc supplements, and the zinc-copper balance can become out of whack if you do that, if you don't compensate with copper. And so some these cashews are a good source of copper, and also the seaweed, I think, is also. So if you eat these nuts and seeds, you're going to get good copper. You really need to get these minerals from your foods. And of course, don't use table salt, use the sea salt, and that has all kinds of minerals in it, as well as the sodium chloride. So again, more natural choices. Always go for natural.
And I agree. I'm totally with you, Stephanie, on that zinc copper balance. And you need copper to run on various enzymes. Remember, those metals, those organic metals in our body run enzyme systems: zinc, copper, magnesium, all those different metals. Silver is not organic in our body. We can tolerate silver, and we've used silver as an antibacterial, antiviral. So we've used a lot of silver sprays during COVID for our nose and throat. And the beautiful thing about silver is you can use it homeopathically. There is a product that I do recommend, Argentin 23, which is a very low level of silver, and you can spray it in your nose, your nares, and your throat, which I've used it for things like strep throat, mono, COVID, because it's antiviral. So
and they also have a copper product too, so you can balance it out. And I just want to do a plug for herbs. You had a list on here, Michelle, of milk thistle, dandelions, and green tea that can help with detoxing. Also, drinking lots of lemon, just having lemon water every day can really help detox your body. Garlic can really help with it, and having high levels of vitamin C, which of course is in lemons. We always want to go to food first, is what I mean.
Absolutely. And I do a drink at lunchtime that's a whole bunch of citrus fruits, limes and lemons and grapefruit and orange, and then throw in a bit of this lovely elixir that is an organic. It's sourced in here in Kauai, and they have garlic, ginger, turmeric, and chili peppers. And it just put a little of that in there, and it gives it a real interesting taste and a delicious drink to have at lunchtime instead of having a Coke. It's so much better.
My grandma used to wear, who lived to 97, and a clove of garlic around her neck on a string every single day of her life. One clove of garlic right here. So maybe not that popular, but very healthy. So I would say I am, and all those products you mentioned, the green tea, the dandelion, the milk thistle, those are all great natural detoxifiers. Those teas are great. I recommend that. And remember, I would recommend juicing over the whole food only when people are having significant dysbiosis, which is an imbalanced microbiome. Too much fiber can be not good for the microbiome initially if people are in bad shape. So what kind of people am I talking about? There was a whole cancer protocol called the Gerson protocol, and he used all raw juices to get people back to health. And that's a lot about that principle is based on. So, but juicing is really help. I juice the whole fruit and vegetable when I juice. I don't toss out the fiber part personally. So I don't use a juicer. If you use a juicer, you want to use one called a masticating juicer or cold press. But I tend to use a Vitamix, and I put the whole food in. And celery, folks, is great for lymph drainage. Juice your celery in there. And so having your blender out, you don't need a fancy Vitamix. You can use a little bullet. You can use your Cuisinart even if you've got that, some type of blender. But the bullet you can get that Bed Bath & Beyond. You can get it anywhere. Get the 20% coupon. And you can use your little bullet, and you can make your fresh veggie juices. For kids, add a little bit of orange or add an apple to it, especially green apple. Great for the fiber, detoxification, and it makes it a little bit sweet. Or I add dates for kids. And one of my favorite treats for kids, this is one of my favorite treats. If kids want a treat, I take a date, organic date, I put a little piece of raw butter in there with a drizzle of maple syrup, organic syrup, and it's a great treat. When kids need got to give kids a sweet treat. And then they get a little raw butter in there. They get a date, super healthy. Dates is my sweetener in fruit drinks for kids. I use dates and a tiny drizzle of maple syrup. So to give you an idea of how, and you can serve those at the birthday party rather than the store-bought Safeway
sodas. Oh, gross.
Sodas.
Parties.
No soda, no cereal.
No soda. Yeah.
No soda, no cereal.
Oh, you mentioned
Absolutely.
lymph drainage, and I want to make sure that we mention walking an hour a day can completely flush out your lymph, as we mentioned that before. But yoga, I do hot yoga 3 times a week. That just gets the toxins out of your bodies. Massage, all kinds of exercises, dry brushing, towards the direction of your heart. You want to go towards the direction of your heart. Saunas, heat therapy, infrared saunas, especially heat therapy, and jumping on a trampoline helps to get the lymph drainage as well. Are there any other tips that you can think of for lymph drainage and detoxing, like through exercise?
Yeah, you got to move because movement, lymph system, it doesn't have any valves on it. So you have to move. It's a passive system. So you must move and you have to be hydrated enough. Most of us aren't hydrated. And if we're big caffeine addicts, those are diuretics. So we're peeing out a lot of fluid, teas and coffees. So you're peeing out more. You need to drink more water. But everything you mentioned, and they have these little mini trampolines. Like if you live in an apartment, maybe if you're jumping on the 6th floor, that could be a problem. But those little mini trampolines, but the brushing. And there was a great study about using heat in obesity. And they did this study, it's an old study, but they use saunas every single day for 15 minutes at 60 degrees Celsius, which is about 140 Fahrenheit. And people who did the heat therapy, in addition, this is before infrared saunas, lost more weight at the end. So using heat, generating your own heat through exercise, right on. But if you have access to a sauna, that could be a great adjunct additionally. But after you sauna, make sure you rinse off. Otherwise, you reabsorb all that stuff back up.
Yeah, I want to mention the
getting out in the sunlight. Make sure you get out in the sunlight, and that'll give you the infrared. And the heat actually grows the exclusion zone water that is so healthy in your blood for circulation.
Great. Somebody asked about the Berkey.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sam.
The Berkey filter doesn't get the out, is what my understanding was.
Say that again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my understanding was that somebody asked about the Berkey filter, and I wanted to touch on that. My understanding is the Berkey filter doesn't get glyphosate out. That's my understanding. If anybody wants to correct me or show research on that, I would just look into that before you get a Berkey filter. Reverse osmosis has been shown to get glyphosate out, like the AquaTrue filter or the zero waste, but you have to put trace minerals back into the water. Otherwise, when your body processes the water, it will leach calcium out of the bones. So much better just to get spring water that's been tested, and not have to do all that. But if you do have to have a filter, I would really look into whether or not that particular filter has been shown to get glyphosate out or not, and fluoride, of course.
Yeah, and I wrote a little paper about it. Glypho what? It's on GMOscience.org, and I put down the filter I use. No stock in the company is zero waste. Zero waste is for those of us who have a pitcher type carbon-based filter, has been shown to get the pesticides out really well, versus more complicated like the True filter. But I think we live in the time now where all of us are going to need some type of water filtration systems, because tap water is contaminated, and as they change lines, they're doing it in California right now. Families don't know, and they have all kinds of, as they change piping systems, they're using PVC systems. They're going from leaded to PVC, and so it's not ideal. So we're going to have to keep our water filtered. What can we say? And they actually they sell portable water filter systems. I'm eyeing one myself, which has a little carbon filter in it. Like when you travel to the airport and you fill your water up, I'm thinking, oh, gee, I did it all the time, and it's not filtered water that I'm refilling up my water bottle. So they actually sell portable water containers with a little carbon filter in it, and I think I'm going to invest. So,
yeah.
And I got the name
they're about $60, but I think they're worth it, especially if you travel a lot. And I want to mention reverse osmosis water filters under the sink. Not a great idea, because you can't clean them out, and mycotoxins can grow in it. And people with children with autism, who have reactions to mold and things like that, they don't know why they're all of a sudden reacting. And sometimes they find, it's the reverse osmosis water filter under the sink that has been growing stuff in it. So that's why I recommend the AquaTrue filter or other filters that are above counter. You can see them and you can clear them out. And there is an AquaTrue filter version that has glass. So that if you do want to avoid the plastic for that as well, but just make sure you can clean whatever that filter is that you're filtering your water out with daily.
So it sounds to me like we're going to need to do something on water filtration coming up.
The show's over. We're over time.
We're over time. We all got very excited about water filters, and we can really do the deep dive and do some research on it. But maybe this would be a good time for a wrap up, unless anyone has any final comments.
There was just so much to say.
There were a few questions hanging in the chat that I thought were important to mention. There were 2 comments about contaminants, microplastics in sea salt, and actually cadmium in the seaweed that Dr. filled up. Yes, apparently Costco is getting sued because of a cadmium.
Oh no! Oh my God, that's interesting.
And then the last question was a diet for asthma. And the hint was, I've heard an anti-inflammatory diet was good for asthma. Is that true? And what would that look like? I think you guys have been describing that all along, but do you want to say a couple words about those things?
Well, I'll just speak to asthma real quick because this is easy for me. And any kid I've ever seen over the past 41 years, you've got asthma, you don't eat dairy, period. That is a direct correlation in my book. And so the first thing you do, in addition to everything else we say, go organic, is take that child off dairy. And I had a very educated person tell me, somebody just Sunday night, saying, but I don't eat dairy. Somebody with asthma, an adult, so can't make this up. I can't reveal her name. And I don't eat dairy. And she goes, I drink almond milk and I do that. I said, you don't eat dairy? Don't you eat cheese? You eat a ton of cheese. She goes, yeah, I eat cheese, but I don't do dairy. So we got a problem. So that would be cheese, and that would be all dairy, not just cow's milk. And I would say even goat, even sheep, even A2, A1 for now.
Even yogurt.
You've got to go. You can do coconut yogurt, cashew yogurt, and even though they sell them in plastic containers, I know you're going to make your own yogurt. Oh boy. But anyway, so that would be my recommendation.
And speaking of milk, I've noticed oat milk is appearing now on the grocery shelves, and oat milk is going to be very problematic if it's not organic. I suspect it's going to be high in glyphosate, just to warn people. You can get organic oat milk.
Very high in glyphosate, yes. We may see some changes because there have been some oat distribution centers that are now refusing oats sprayed with glyphosate. They're claiming it's because the glyphosate destroys the structure of the grain. They're not saying anything about cancer and health effects. So we may see a change in that, and we would love at Moms Across America to get more funding to do more testing. We just want to put that plug out there. We would love to test oat milk. I just got a request for it today, actually, an email from somebody who had their patient was on oat milk, and his glyphosate levels were 3.3 parts per billion. He went off oat milk, and within a week, his levels went down to 1.6 parts per billion. So yeah, that's interesting that just came up today. So oat milk must be organic.
So, and Zen, let's just not remind everyone who's listening that in Michael Antonio's study several years ago, 0.1 to 0.2 parts per billion caused non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We didn't go into that today. We'll save that for another show. 1 in 3 Americans. So that was 0.1 to 0.2 parts per billion caused, not correlated. So when Zen's saying 2 or 3, these numbers, you may say, oh, but that's really low. Oh, not so fast. Those numbers are high.
Yes.
All right. Well, great show. This has been amazing. I'm so glad we wrapped up the obesity section with this great talk on detoxification. It's useful for everyone under all circumstances for our health. So what's next? What's the next show for the new MDs?
I don't think we've decided that yet.
We don't know.
We have a long list and we have to do it out. We've got all kinds of things, mold and frequencies and heart disease. We don't know yet which order.
All right. Well, you all can vote in the chat and let us know what you'd like to see the new MDs cover.
Yeah, we'll take requests. Okay, folks. So you let us know what you want the new MDs to cover.
If they send us an email, we will look at what our audiences want to learn about and what's giving them problems at home. We're totally open to it. So yes, please send in an email or put it in our Facebook chat. We look at this stuff and we want to know what, we can talk amongst ourselves until the cows come home. But for you, what's interesting for you, let us know.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Catch us again next month. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.